All right, so round 4. Attempted. So as you can see, this thing's gotten massive sitting in this bowl. I did a in the proof oven, so it was about 100 degrees, which means it only took 2 to 3 hours to get this big. So it's a very active yeast. What we're doing now is we're going to deflate it, or knock it down, as they also say, or punch it down, and it's going to be do some kneading. Now, because I messed up the whole video thing, this step was done last time too, is the kneading part anyway. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put some fresh flour in, make sure it gets all evenly distributed, and then I'm going to knead it a little bit. So the way you knead it is you fold it back on itself and then squish it together, churning it a little bit each time. And you just keep doing this as the more you do this, the more tough the bread will be. So if you're making pizza dough, you got to do this a lot. If you want like a real traditional artisanal, really hard, firm bread, then you want to do this a lot. If you're making a white, light, fluffy bread, you would do this very little, just enough for it to come together like it is now, actually. This is also a time to add just a little bit of extra flour to make sure it's not too wet of a dough, because as the dough sits and rises, it will continually absorb the liquid, which is why it gets a little wetter as it sits. So by putting a little extra in now, it's going to add a little bit more flour for the yeast to eat. So I'm going to get this into a nice firm, and I'm going to have this be my last rise. So once it's ready, I'm going to basically put it in the shape that I'm going to cook it in, which is going to be, I'm going to do a round loaf. That's a little too wet still, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour. Do that, maybe another round here. So get this done. Get this flour worked in. And not that too wet would have been bad. I just find the way I make them a little drier makes it a little easier to work with. You'll see what I mean when I go to put it in the pot to cook. Alright, that's a little more manageable. So once I get it into this round ball, back to the bowl, I add a little bit of oil, olive oil. I'm going to drop it good side down first, swirl it around, make sure you get a nice coating on it, then flip it over, make sure you get all the edges of your bread coated with a little layer of oil, plus it keeps the bowl liquefied. The more oil you put on it, the more times you do this on the outside too, it'll put a nice thick crust on the bread when you cook it. So that is ready for its final rise. Now I'm going to let it go until it gets about twice that size, but not to where it's like falling apart, and that will be when we put it in the oven. So when you see it starting to get close, that's when you want to heat your oven up, which will be the next step. So you want to cover this and let it sit for one last rise.